Welcome to a rendition of Steve Allen's Meeting of the Minds, presented by the sophomore Lyceum class led by Mrs. Marjorie Williams. Our research of significant historical figures has allowed us to enter a world of discovery.
Showing the similarities and differences of their lives and times has been our goal. Through this portrayal of these characters, we hope to enhance our knowledge as well as yours.
We hope you enjoy our journey through time.
decisions did not affect my loved ones in a positive way. After writing the article that I was speaking of earlier, the business manager of Free Speech and Headlight was forced to leave town by a mob. I've always thought that this was my fault.
Don't blame yourself for others' hatred, Ida. I know that you cannot control other people's actions, only your own.
Thank you, Joan. That's very considerate.
I'm not nearly as mannerly as I am honest. My brother used to say that to me when I was young. The last time I saw him was the day I was captured. He fought by my side through it all.
Why were you fighting?
I fought for the king and my country. My saints guided me along the way to make me feel secure.
What are your saints?
They came to me in my dreams. They were my mentors in my later life. Some thought I was lying about them. The church used my visions against me in the trial. I feel they knew I was an honest soldier. The English just wanted me out of the war. The bishops were under pressure from the King of England to convict me of heresy, sorcery, witchcraft, blasphemy, and anything else they wanted to prove with their false evidence. Sometimes the English tricked me into revealing secrets of my faith by disguising themselves as French allies. The trial was unfair, but I knew that from the beginning.
I sympathize with you. In 1521, I received a summons from the church to appear before the Diet.
What is the Diet?
Well, it is the meeting of the emperor and princes in Germany. Anyway, they tried their hardest to find evidence against me so that they could convict me. They could not find enough evidence to convict me, so I left. On the way home, I was kidnapped. I thought that my life was over, but it turned out to be my dear friend, Prince Frederick. Prince Frederick held me in his castle and gave me an alias. Although I did not enjoy being held captive, it was the best thing for me to do since the church was looking to kill me.
I'm sorry, but that must have been really freaky. I'm sure that when you have a problem with something as important as religion, that you wouldn't mind going through the things you did.
I'm firm to my beliefs. The church as a whole, and especially the Pope, knew my convictions were true. That is why the Pope declared me innocent of all charges. However, by that time, I was already dead.
That must have been weird, too.
I believe in saints, and I definitely believe in God. But I cannot entertain the thought of saints guiding and visiting a poor little French girl.
You may believe me if you like, yet I assure you I'm no liar.
I do not believe that you are lying. However, I believe that you are mistaken in the mind.
I am positive that Catherine visited me many times. How else could I have had the psychic ability I possessed? She told me of the future.
My dear child, I am sure that you truly believe what you are saying, but I'm not sure that you understand how difficult it is for me to comprehend saints visiting you. Maybe you were hallucinating or imagining as young children often do.
But how else would I have recognized the men who came to visit me without an introduction or note of my injury in battle the day before it occurred? They told me of all this. However, I am not the person who is responsible for assuring you. I will leave that task in God's hands.
Well, you know, Martin, you never explained to us why you were so against the church.
Well, in my time, the church was beginning to become very corrupt. In my eyes, it seemed to be a money-hungry institution rather than the house of God. I was especially against the sale of indulgences.
I don't want to sound like the ignorant one, but what exactly are indulgences?
Indulgences were basically pieces of paper that people could buy in order to wash away all of their sins. I thought that money could not cleanse the soul, but I guess the Pope and his followers thought it could. The selling of indulgences caused me to post the 95 Theses on the church door.
Why did you post them on the church door?
In my time, the church door was like the town bulletin board. Everything that was important was nailed to it. Therefore, I thought that this was the best place to post my ideas on the church and its corruption.
Well, I know what you mean when you talk about corruption. I had to, with the rest of the black musicians of my time, fight against corrupt producers and critics who exploited black musicians. We were creating things that were way ahead of the rest of the musical world, but it was not respected till they got a white performer to copy what we did. We were purely in music for the fun and love of it, but let's face it, we've all had a rough time with corruption.
Yes.
That's true.
But when I had a rough time with ignorant people, I would just shrug it off. I always found refuge in my music, and then I would keep on putting out the best music I could.
That is very admirable.
Thanks. I also let my religion help me through the rough times. That was just my way of dealing with my problems.
Many people find Jesus as a sweet refuge from trouble. Is this how you felt, Mr. Gillespie?
Well, I didn't really practice what most would consider an orthodox religion. I was a Baha'i.
A Baha'i.
What's that?
It was my religion. I was into the religion because I really dug the idea of unity that is stressed in their teachings. I always believed that unity between everyone was what God had intended. I think that all the races were meant to share their differences. I also thought that the idea of unity was perfect for jazz music because the styles of jazz that I like to play were really just combinations of several other styles of music. But when those styles got together, man, it was something else.
Well, it sounds to me that you liked your religion mainly because of your music.
Well, it is unfortunate that you weren't a Christian, but I suppose you are entitled to your own opinion.
Yes, I am.
You know, I have noticed that despite all of our differences, we all have many things in common.
And what is that?
We have all had to deal with persecution and to persevere in spite of our hardships.
That is very true, Ida. During my life, I had many friends, but even more enemies. My enemies were constantly trying to find evidence to arrest me and to eventually kill me. It would have been easy for me to give up and keep my ideas to myself, but I didn't. I truly felt that I was correct and that the world should hear my views. I didn't care what other people thought about me. I'm not trying to sound haughty, but that is how I overcame my hardships.
Well, Martin, we all sounded haughty to those people who didn't understand what we were trying to do. Like when I and several of my friends were developing bebop.
What exactly is bebop?
Well, bebop is just a free form of jazz. But when we were developing it, the older musicians thought it was horrible because it stretched the limits. They came around eventually, but it was a whole lot harder to deal with the many white critics of that time. My life was never really threatened like your lives were. Most of America had gotten past that stage. But because I was a black man who was outplaying some of the white musicians, the critics always just tried to keep me down. But I made it to the top, and now I've heard I'm considered a legend.
People admire me more than now that I am dead as well, Diz. When I was alive, people gave me many names. Some admired my military ability, but not myself. Many mocked me, saying that I came from the devil, laughing at my dress. Yet after I was executed, the church canonized me as a saint in 1920. I'm now the patron saint of France. There are monuments and statues throughout the French countryside portraying my military and my religious side. Now the church looks at me as a symbol of good, not a sign of evil.
I am also seen as a symbol of good to some people. In fact, I have also been compared to you, Joan. I have been faced with many obstacles due to people's prejudices about blacks and women. I worked hard to make people aware of the monstrous acts of hatred that occurred in the South. I was involved in many groups that fought for equal rights. I wanted to be treated with respect and dignity, and I was willing to gain that status as an American citizen by any means necessary. Despite my trials, I have always said that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and it does seem to me that notwithstanding all these social agencies and activities, there's not that vigilance which should be exercised in the preservation of our rights.
Well, Ida, it seems that you've summed up what we've all experienced in life. And I must say, I learned a lot tonight.
Yeah, I really admire everyone's dedication to their work. I would love to hear more, but I must be going. I have a dinner date with Prince Frederick, my best friend.
Yes, Mass is starting soon. I shouldn't be late.
Thanks for the dinner.
Thanks for having us over. It's been quite a night.
No problem.
Glad to
Doc.
meet you.
Yes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and I'm here tonight to get acquainted with 4 prominent and interesting, I hope, leaders of our world. So first, I'd like to welcome the founder of the Republic of China, all the way from China, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sun Yat-sen.
Ni hao ma, which means, how are you in Chinese?
I'm fine, and thank you for joining me tonight. I'm not quite sure of your involvements with China, so let's sit down and discuss some of them.
Well, many of them were not very pleasant, such as the uprisings against the Manchu government. Another example would have to be the overtaking of the Republican government by Wang Shikai.
Well, what caused the revolts of the Manchu government?
Well, just to name a few, the people did not like how the government constantly raised taxes, did not train an army for the protection of the people, and also how they divided the rich from the poor.
Rich from the poor, black from the white. That sounds similar to the government of the United States in the 1950s. Oh, we've been so pleasantly interrupted by Lord Byron, the famous poet from England. And how are you tonight?
I'm fine. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How was your trip?
Long, but most enjoyable.
Well, sit down and let's talk about your life and your poetry.
Of course. My real name is George Gordon. My uncle Byron died, and I, being the only male descendant, was given the title and the estate, and I became Lord Byron. Most of my favorite times in life were spent traveling around the world, writing and having grand adventures.
I have also traveled much in my lifetime. Some of the most memorable places I visited were Hong Kong, Japan, and France. Have you ever visited any of these magnificent places?
Yes, I've been to France. I have also been to Greece, India, West India, Spain, and your home country, China.
India, Greece, China, my. You both are very well exposed to the foreign cultures of the world. Oh, no need to knock. Come on in. Good evening, sir, and how are you tonight?
I'm just fine. And how are you lovely people tonight?
Fine, thank you.
I am Francis Dominique de Santa Breda, the ruler of Hispaniola and the thorn in the side of Napoleon Bonaparte. I was next in line to take over the Irada tribe before Lord Byron's people took me into 47 years of slave labor.
I am a full-blooded European, but do not blame me for my forefathers' mistakes.
Order, gentlemen, gentlemen. Before a verbal dispute arises, Toussaint, I can say I can relate to your experiences of racial discrimination.
I'm sorry, but my temper got the best of me. As I started to say before, I, better known as Toussaint Louverture, was the ruler of what is now Haiti. I took over the Haitian slave revolt by eliminating anybody who opposed me, including my own nephew.
Killing your nephew? Well, you do know violence is not the only solution to the problems of the world.
But sometimes it is the only solution to the injustices of mankind.
I have seen injustices in my life, but none to spark such violence as Mr. Toussaint has described.
Well, on a lighter note, our final guest is arriving as we speak. Ladies and gentlemen, Genghis Khan. Good evening, sir. Genghis Khan, ladies and gentlemen.
I am the greatest leader of all. I conquered all of Asia with my ferocious warriors. No one could defeat my army.
Such great accomplishments. Do you take all the credit?
No. You are wrong again, of course. As I said before, if it were not for my warriors, we wouldn't have conquered as much as we did. I did teach them the tactics, but it was they who put them to use.
That was the downfall of my troops. We did not train ourselves properly and did not have the proper weapons we needed to go to war. 3 of the 4 uprisings I staged failed because of this.
I experienced many unhappy people during my involvement of the Brown versus Board of Education, a landmark case dealing with segregation in schools. But the level of retaliation was never as great as in any of your cases. With all of this negativity, I'm sure there were some positive influences from others.
Most of my influences were from my time and from the past. Keats, Shelley, Shakespeare, Sophocles, Goethe, and other famous authors were my inspirations.
My influence was from the death of my father. My main concern was destroying the tribe that killed him when I was just 9 years old.
Yes, my situation is similar in that my biggest influence was the death of my good friend's father by the Manchu government, who beheaded him unjustly.
My positive influences were my hatred of my white oppressors and those who beat me for attempting to further my education. Although you may think that all these experiences are not positive, they enabled me to topple the government, the Spanish and French armies, and stand up to the might of Napoleon.
I was thrown out of my country too. I was abducted when I was a couple of years after I was thrown out. The government wanted to kill me and my family. They put me in stocks and paraded me around town so the townspeople could hurl insults. One night, the soldiers got drunk and left a little child to watch over me. I leaped at the child and ran for a nearby river and floated away on my stocks.
After the Manchu government found out that I was starting secret societies, which are revolutionist groups against the government, they banned me from traversing to China and Japan. I was eventually sought after with an award of over $100,000 to be beheaded by the government. Later, I had to bribe boatmen and other civilians to help me travel to other countries to give my lectures.
It seems that we all have had, how should I say, unpleasant confrontations with the government. I myself have dealt with the government on many occasions. After being voted special counsel of the NAACP, I dealt with numerous cases concerning school segregation, from prestigious universities to less popular elementary schools.
I have dealt with numerous occurrences of segregation on both an educational and social level. I had to seek the help of other blacks in my pursuit for education because it was punishable by death to educate the slaves.
I was never aware of the capacity to treat others physically equal to us as lesser beings.
My problems of revolution were so great that I had little time to ponder on segregation. However, the school that I attended in Hawaii was especially keen on having students that were baptized. When I informed my brother that I was going to be baptized, he vehemently rejected the proposition. For fear that I would go against his wish, I was forced to return to China. Later, after my father died and I could earn my own income, I was converted to a Christian.
Okay, Mr. Toussaint.
Get it out, Toussaint.
I too changed religions in the course of my life. When I was stripped of my home, life, and freedom by my white oppressors, I was a devout practitioner of voodoo. I was later forced to become a Catholic by my humanitarian slave owners.
Religion, my favorite topic. As a child, I was forced to learn everything about the Bible and spent many hours hearing the great speeches of my preachers. I learned of the wonderful Christian values. With my many friends, such as Keats and Shelley, we would talk about religion for many hours and force ourselves to stop after we were completely drunk on the finest wines in England.
Religion did not play an enormous role in my life, but there have been many a times when the one upstairs had been looking down on me.
Why you laugh?
Oh, I just find it ironic that after escaping death on 3 different occasions, by those who disagree with my opinions, of course, that my faith in God is not stronger.
I too was kidnapped by a messenger of the Emperor of China. At that time, they were opposed to my revolutionary efforts. When I visited London to meet a good friend of mine, Dr. Cantley, I was followed by a messenger. He intercepted me while I was walking home. He disguised himself as a follower of my beliefs and asked me to talk to him for a while at his house. When I was beguiled there, they captured me and locked me up. I was fortunate enough to have a compassionate door guard who notified Dr. Cantley of my capture. Dr. Cantley informed the press of my kidnapping. A rescue team was sent out for me, and I walked out a free man.
As I said before, I was kidnapped too.
Such interesting stories. I wish my life was as exciting as yours, Mr. Khan, or you, Mr. Sen. My life was full of social problems with women, and the rest was my writing. Never ever was I kidnapped or floated down the river on stocks.
I too have had an interesting life. I spent the latter part of my life destroying the white and mulatto militias who tried to stop me in my pursuit for social reform for the black populace. I spent many more months running from the French army before being captured, spending the final months of my life in a decrepit prison cell, separated from my family, friends, and all chances of hope.
My, I must say, Mr. Toussaint, I am very impressed. You seem like a very well-spoken, well-educated African American. Unfortunately, during the race discrepancies in the South, these characteristics would not have been associated with a black man. You, like myself, would have only been considered a nigger.
You may have been wrongly judged when it came to the amount of intelligence based on the color of your skin.
I would say that we have all misjudged at some point in our lives. Whether it's because of color or beliefs, I'm sure we have shared a lifetime of misery.
We cannot blame them, however, for everybody is ignorant in their own way.
Some more than others.
Some of us have not had as miserable a life as others. My life, in comparison to all of yours, was one of very petty concerns and selfishness. I'm sure each one of you had a goal to attain. You, Mr. Khan, had your quest of dominating Asia, and you, Mr. Sen, your goal to free the Chinese from Manchu rule, and Toussaint, your goal to free your beloved country from the evil white oppressors, and Justice Marshall, your goal for equality for African Americans. And my only goal was to educate and entertain my readers to my personal feelings and opinions of how I perceive the world around me. My satire told of the evil oppression of the Greeks by the Turkish rule and how I thought of my literary peers who thought my works were boring, or others who complained that my works were unorthodox.
Your struggle with your society and their tunnel-minded visions were obvious in the poetry that you wrote.
I did not know you read my works.
Oh yes, I had the pleasure of reading them while at my years at Howard University. Your works were well perceived by the students and the professors alike. Would you mind to enlighten us with your talent and your tongue?
Yes, please.
Of course. My days are in the yellow leaf. The flowers and the fruits of love are gone. The worm, the canker, and the grief are mine alone. The fire that on my bosom preys is lone as some volcanic isle. No torch is kindled at its blaze. It is a funeral pile. The hope, the fear, the jealous care, the exalted portion of the pain, and the power of love I cannot share. But wear the chain. 'Tis not thus, and 'tis not here, such thoughts should shake my soul, nor now where glory's decks the heroes bear, or binds his brow. The sword, the banner, and the field, glory and Greece around me see. The Spartan, borne upon his shield, was not more free. Awake, not Greece, she is awake. Awake, my spirit. Think through whom thy life blood tracks its parent lake, and strike home, tread those reviving passions down. Unworthy manhood, unto thee indifferent should the smile or the frown of beauty be. If thou regretst thy youth, why live? The land of honorable death is here. Up to the field and give away thy breath. Seek out, less often sought than found, a soldier's grave, for thee the best, and look around and choose thy ground and take the rest.
Oh, very nice.
That was wonderful.
From your poetry, I can see that you, as well as the rest of us, contributed to society in many, many ways. I myself rebuilt the devastated country of Haiti after my massacre of the countryside. I reestablished trade with foreign countries and established an army that would protect us from any further invasions from France or Spain. We declared us a French Commonwealth while leaving control of the country in our hands, not that of the French government.
Well, I achieved my trade by defeating countries and forcing them to sign treaties with my country. If they did not agree, we would just conquer them even more.
Although I did not live to see my work carried out to its fullest potential, I did set out the three people's principles.
What are the three people's principles?
The three people's principles are national solidarity, political control, and economic welfare. This paved the way for a Republican form of government for the centuries to come.
My fight for equality for African Americans was shared by many with the same dreams and aspirations as I. My battles with school segregation are primarily associated with my name, and also my term as Supreme Court Justice paved the way for future African American lawyers.
My poetry was my life. I spent most of my life towards the feelings I kept inside and displayed them on paper. If I feel that someone has read my work and feel that it has affected them in some way, then I have achieved my goal.
Well, it seems as this is the end of our discussion, and thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I see now why we are all gathered here tonight. Each and every one of us has contributed to our societies in our own way, and I commend you all. This has truly been a meeting of minds.
Good evening. I'm Sir Winston Churchill. I was Prime Minister at Great Britain from 1940 to 1945 and from 1951 to 1955. I led the country of Great Britain during World War II. This evening I've invited a few major figures in world history to dine with me in my home. That must be one of them now.
Good evening, Sir Winston. I'm Ava Perron, known to many as Evita. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, I was a political and spiritual leader for the people of Argentina.
I wonder who that could be.
Greetings. How good of you to have me here. I am Frederick Chopin, a musician from the Romantic era. I lived in the early 19th century. Most of the pieces that I composed are for the piano. Many people think of me as one of the greatest pioneers in music. I was most widely known for my unique chord structures and compositions.
The door was open, so I decided to come in. I'm Miles Davis, trumpet player and composer. I was known for being one of the pioneers of cool jazz.
Please, everyone, sit down. What a diverse group we have here this evening. We're all from different countries. I'm from Great Britain. Frederick, didn't you live in France?
Actually, I was born in Poland, and then I moved to Paris when I wanted to further my musical career. I was loyal to Poland throughout my life. My schooling took place there. I went to the Warsaw Conservatory where I studied music.
I also studied music in college. I attended Juilliard School of Music. I studied composition, chord structures, and many composer styles of music. Actually, Frederick, you were one of the composers that I studied. I'm curious, what did you study in college?
Well, I studied many aspects of music. They included composition, harmony, and counterpoint. Ava, what type of schooling did you have?
My schooling came from the School of Life. I was born into a poor family, and when I was old enough to begin working, I moved to Buenos Aires to become an actress. But that didn't quite turn out the way I had expected.
Well, I did not have a great schooling experience myself. I always showed a lot of ability, but my poor attitude kept me from doing well. I ended up going to a military school to improve my discipline. I never had a close family as a child. My father either ignored me or tormented me, but I still idolized him. My mother shone for me like the evening star. I loved her, but at a distance.
My mother and I never really got along either. We didn't see eye to eye on many subjects such as my music and my studies. My father was the one who supported me on my music and my decision to quit Juilliard.
My family and friends were supportive of my music throughout my life. When I was a child, they encouraged me to perform. I even played for the Grand Duke Constantine, who was greatly impressed. Ava, did you have a close relationship with your family?
Yes, my family and I were pretty close. I was the youngest of 5 children who looked out for each other because our father had deserted us when I was only 5. Throughout my childhood, I was determined to rise above the poverty that was around us. That's what motivated me to seek out my dreams in Buenos Aires. Miles, what motivated you to pursue a career in music?
Well, I grew up around music. My mother played the violin and the piano. There are many musicians in my family. I began playing trumpet when I was 9, which was when I started taking lessons.
I too had a family of musicians. My mother and older sister played the piano. Sometimes when my mother played, I was so touched that I started crying. The beauty of music was inspiring to me ever since childhood.
Even though my father treated me poorly when I was young, I still admired him. His political career inspired me to follow in his footsteps. I began my own political career shortly after I retired from the military in my late 20s. At that point, I was elected to a seat in Parliament. This was the stepping stone to a higher political office.
My political career began after I married Juan Perón. After I helped him later become president of Argentina, I concentrated on helping the poor. I was opposed to the middle class and the rich because they'd kept me from my father's funeral. But I'd rather not talk about that right now. So how did you begin your career, Frederick?
Well, my musical career began when I moved to Paris. I was introduced to many famous musicians there. One named Friedrich Kalkbrenner arranged a hall in which I gave my debut concert. Though my originality was praised, I was criticized for playing too softly. Many also thought of my works as improvisations. So Miles, how did you get started on your career after attending Juilliard?
Actually, I started my career while I was a student at Juilliard. Shortly after I got there, I began playing with Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. I quit Juilliard and started playing with them professionally. After Dizzy stopped playing with Charlie, I took his place. I played with Charlie for about 1.5 years, and then I began playing with Billy Eckstine's band. Winston, what marked the opening stage of your adult life?
Well, as I aforementioned, I commenced my political career with a seat in Parliament. During this stage of my career, I married Clementine Hosier in 1908. I later had 5 children with her. Miles, did you have a family?
Yes, I did. I got married 3 times. I had a daughter and 2 sons.
Juan and I never had children because we were both dedicated to our careers. My greatest political venture was known as the Rainbow Tour. It was a 3-month-long voyage to Europe, which began with Spain. Before my arrival, I'd organized a distribution of food among the poor to ensure my popularity. The Spaniards deeply respected me. When the King of Spain had arrived late to a bullfight, there were riots. The people booed him. But when I was 2 hours late, they waited in silence.
Ava, did you visit any other countries during the Rainbow Tour?
Yes, I visited many other countries in Europe. After Spain, I went to Portugal and Italy, and then it was on to Paris. My tour ended abruptly, though, when King George of Great Britain sent his apologies, saying that he and his family were going on vacation in Scotland, and my stop there was canceled. I was extremely insulted.
Well, you did not deserve our hospitality.
Oh, really? Well, everyone knows that I came out on top.
Please do not fight. Let's talk about more pleasant things.
I think what I said is sufficient. Frederick, tell me about your career.
Well, my career consisted mainly of teaching and composing. The wealthy aristocrats of Paris constituted the majority of my pupils. Once I began to earn a steady income from these sources, I developed a daily routine. I taught and composed during the day, and I attended receptions and dinner parties with artists, writers, and musicians at night. At one of those parties, I met the writer Aurora Dupin, known as George Sand. We developed a very close friendship. She even nursed me to health when I was very sick. Those were difficult years of my life.
I went through a trying time myself. The second stage of my career was my promotion to the Home Secretaryship, a job that depressed me. The next year, I became the First Lord of the Admiralty, which was a much better job for me. I prepared the naval fleet for World War I. My breakthrough decisions were not grasped by the general public, and therefore I was relieved of my duties and given a powerless job. I re-entered the military and served as a colonel during the war. I loved military life, but I simply could not stay away from politics.
As politics was your calling, music was mine. It continued to be a part of my life even after I quit Bill Eckstine's band. I then started my own band called the Miles Davis Milestones, in which we began recording many songs. I also had several of my peers record on these charts with me.
Miles, how many records did you make?
Well, Ava, I made about 40 records. I composed a variety of pieces. Frederick, what type of pieces did you compose?
I composed many different types of pieces. My nocturnes have a melancholy sound. My preludes are short but evoke images. Etudes focus on specific technical problems. Mazurkas and polonaises are like Polish dances, and waltzes are brilliant and have the atmosphere of a salon. In fact, I have a certain waltz in mind that I would like to play for you. The waltz in E minor, posthumous.
Oh, that would be lovely. Please do.
It seems that our musical styles are somewhat alike. The volume of your pieces varied throughout, as do many of my songs. When I first started playing, many of my songs were softer and less complex because I was timid in my playing. As I became more confident, I began playing louder, faster, and higher.
I was never able to play very loudly in a concert hall because of my frailty. Most of my performances took place in salons with a small audience.
When I began playing, I played in small clubs. I did not start playing in big concerts until the late 50s.
When you were first starting your studies of music, I was entering the prime of my political career. I spent much of the 1930s as the leader of the opposition to the main political party in England. I made many astute prophecies about World War II and the threat of the German Nazis. Unfortunately for my country, my warnings were ignored.
Oh no, how terrible.
Thanks for the sympathy. War was eventually declared in 1939 on Germany. After many grave mistakes, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Neville Chamberlain, stepped down. I took his place as Prime Minister of Great Britain.
Winston, what did you do as Prime Minister?
Well, Ava, the first speech that I made was when I stated that I had nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And I felt that that was a theme of my prime ministry. My enthusiasm towards the war is contagious throughout the country of Great Britain. My brilliant strategic decisions greatly influenced the Allied victory. If I may continue, I concentrated on foreign issues as prime minister and ignored important domestic issues. This led to my fallout as a popular prime minister. Therefore, I was not re-elected in 1945. I guess the British people learned their lesson. I was elected again as prime minister in 1951. I must admit, my skills had diminished as I got older. I ended up resigning in 1955.
I too had many hardships in my life. They began while I was in Billy Eckson's band in the late 40s. I began doing cocaine and heroin.
I don't know much about those types of drugs. What were their effects on you?
At first it didn't seem like I had much trouble controlling them, but towards the late 60s I began feeling the effects of the drugs. My playing started to suffer as well as my health. In 1974 I collapsed while visiting my family. They rushed me to the hospital and they discovered that I had a bleeding ulcer. Shortly after that, I decided to drop drugs and move on with my life. Because of drugs, I had been forced to retire from music. After being out of music for close to 4 months, I was finally able to make my comeback.
Unlike you, I was not able to play well towards the end of my life. I had little strength because I was afflicted with the disease tuberculosis.
My last days were started because of the cancer infesting my body, but I fought for the poor until the end.
Really? You were a fighter for the poor? I myself helped them in many ways. I played a part in creating a welfare program that was promised to help the needy people of Great Britain.
You helped to put food in the mouths of the hungry. You helped to provide a roof over their heads. You helped to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. I was a true leader of the poor. I did all of these things. I was a true defender of their wishes.
But were their needs that important? I feel the most important thing in society is to have a high social status. I thought that the luxuries of life were important.
If you really felt this way, I take pity on you. The poor people are those who provide the cheap labor that produces the very things you call luxuries.
I agree with you. I always had respect for the poor because of the hardships that they must go through. Though, as we have found out tonight, we have all had hardships and troubles.
And we have overcome them to make great impacts on the world.
You're right, Frederick. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation tonight, but we should move to the dining hall.